Hey, everybody, welcome in. It is what's today? Wednesday. Man, the days are blending together. Training camp winding down. It's a Wednesday edition of the Utopia Football Podcast, a practice report. This will be a quick one today. Training camp report from practice. I think this is practice number 20. They've had some walkthroughs lately, the Texans have, that I don't know if they count as practices or not, but I think really for our purposes of what I've been doing during training camp, giving you guys a report the same day that they have practice as best I can straight off of the practice field. I think today and tomorrow are the last two. This one's dropping a little late today because Seth Payne and I had an exclusive sit down with Cal and Hannah McNair of the Houston Texans, the owners, obviously, the Houston Texans. You can hear that tomorrow on Payne and Pendergast at 7 o'clock. So at least at 7 o'clock. We might replay it again in the 9. It was a pretty informative sit down. Obviously, a lot of talk about the energy and the buzz around the team, but they shed a lot of light on the process of arriving at D'Amico Ryans last year, the relationship between Nick Caserio and D'Amico Ryans, and some of the things that have led them to be so out in front with how they've been running the team over the last 2 years. So it was a really good conversation with the two of them. And 7 o'clock tomorrow is when you can hear that on Payne and Pendergast. Sports Radio 610, the Odyssey app is where you can find that. So let's get right into it. Practice today. Full disclosure, I was only at practice for the last hour. It started at 9. Obviously, I'm still on the air. I got there as fast as I could. I did get there for most of what really mattered at camp, which is the 11 on 11. If you've been to a practice, then you know the first 45 minutes to an hour are kind of just individual drills and a lot of install that goes on. That's fairly boring. There's not a lot to pull from that. Although from what I understand, they did do some one-on-one drills today that I didn't get to see. I'm very anxious to read the accounts of Cody Stutes, John Harris, and others that write full synopses of the practice. But I'm just going to give you some of the impressions of what I saw. I'll do that shortly. But I want to get into two topics. One, the injury report and what exactly these injuries and the guys that are missing time mean for them. And then I want to get into the Dameon Pierce conundrum. Pierce actually had a pretty good practice today, but he's had good practices before. He has yet to have a good game really since 2022. So I want to get into the Pierce conundrum, especially with the game coming up on Saturday with the Rams. And then I'll get into a few of the things that I saw out of practice. This will be a quick one. This will be probably about a 10 to 15 minute podcast. But as far as the injuries go with the team right now, it was largely the same cast of characters that have been injured of late. Davis Mills was back at practice today. He had some good throws. We'll get into that in the notes section of this podcast. Ben Skoranek returned to practice today from a leg injury that's forced him to miss a couple of weeks. CJ Henderson, who didn't play on Saturday against the Giants, he dressed out at practice today and participated. So there are several folks who were back at practice today. And CJ Henderson and Ben Skoranek are guys that are fighting for their jobs. So it's good to see them back at practice. As far as the guys who didn't practice, I'm going to go through the list here. And this is courtesy of Aaron Wilson of KPRC Channel 2. He tweets that out each day. He's pretty good at taking attendance. I think of the guys who missed practice today, there's a handful of them where it doesn't mean anything in terms of their spot on the roster. Christian Harris missed again with a calf. I think there's a good chance. It feels like there's a chance that Christian Harris makes the 53 and then gets put on IR. So we'll see what happens. He just hasn't been practicing at all, and he hasn't even really been out there. I didn't see him out there today. Will Anderson Jr., ankle injury. He's obviously, his spot on the roster is perfectly secure, and it doesn't sound like there's any concern long-term with Will Anderson's ankle injury. For me, other than just the fact that he had an ankle injury at the end of last year, I hope this isn't something that's chronic. I hope that it was something that actually happened at a practice or a game where Will Anderson was unable to, where he tweaked an ankle, as opposed to just something that he's been dealing with. Other than that, everybody who's missing time right now is missing time at the peril of not making the final roster. Jeff Okudah has been dealing with a hip injury for weeks now. He's in a battle at cornerback. MJ Stewart has a leg injury. He was out. I think his job is in jeopardy at safety as much as they like him on special teams. Andrew Beck has missed all kinds of camp with injuries, and he's got a calf injury right now. They brought in a fullback yesterday, Bawden, the kid from the Jets. I think it's Nick Bawden. I'm not his first name escapes me off the top of my head. He's got the wife who has like 150,000 TikTok followers. And I know that was in conjunction with putting Dalton Keene on injured reserve with a torn ACL. I think they're probably still looking for a solution at fullback. And I say that because British Brooks played fullback with the ones at times today. So I think Beck is in danger of not making the roster. Charlie Heck has a foot injury, plantar fasciitis, that he's dealing with right now. Charlie Heck is somebody who's been dealing with injuries for a couple of years. I like Charlie a lot, but the goal of coming back with the Texans on a one-year deal was for him to show he could stay healthy, and that's not happened. So Charlie Heck definitely in jeopardy. David Sharp, a leg injury, a tackle. He's been practicing for most of the time, but he was somebody fighting for a roster spot anyways, as was Heck. Tegan Catoriano out with a calf injury. I've said this multiple times on the podcast. I think Tegan Catoriano is in real jeopardy of not making the team, especially given the fact that the three spots ahead of him at tight end all appear to be solidified with Brevin Jordan, Cade Stover, and Dalton Schultz. Barring an injury to any of those three, I think Tegan Catoriano is going to get cut. Danico Autry is suspended. He has not been practicing. I think he's eligible to practice, but he's just not practicing. Tim Settle has a calf injury. I think he's certainly in jeopardy of not making the team. He's a journeyman defensive lineman, and some of the interior defensive linemen have really shown up, including Marcus Harris, the 7th-round pick. So the last one is Noah Brown. And as you guys know from this podcast, I am not nearly as bullish on Noah Brown being a lock cinch to make this team as some are. He's been missing time with a shoulder injury for over half of training camp now, and he was injured all of last season, and he's an average football player. He's not to the level, not even close to the level of the guys in front of him on the depth chart at that position. So that injury list, normally I wouldn't take 3 or 4 minutes on the podcast to go through the injury list like that and give thoughts on it in detail, but this is basically cut-down week. Cut-down day is August 27th next week, and I think of the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 or 12, about a dozen guys that are injured. I think the only ones that can sleep at night knowing they have a spot on the team are Christian Harris and Will Anderson. The rest of them are all guys that need to get back on the football field, I think, in order to secure their spots on the team. So that's the injury report from today's practice. We'll get into some of my notes from the practice, but I think to me, the biggest conundrum right now on this team and the biggest storyline heading into preseason game 3, the final preseason game, is how does Dameon Pierce get used in this game, if he gets used at all in this game. I think Dameon Pierce should play in this game. I think he needs to play in this game. I think he's got a job to go earn, and you guys know I love Dameon Pierce, but I think there's an outside chance that Dameon Pierce gets treated like a made guy in this game. He's gotten treated like a made guy throughout the entirety of training camp, with the things that D'Amico Ryans positively has said about him, that Nick Caserio has said about him. They've talked about him like somebody who's going to be on this team this year whenever they've been asked about Dameon Pierce. Seth Payne, my co-host on Sports Radio 610, asked D'Amico Ryans today what Dameon Pierce's biggest obstacle is, and D'Amico blamed the blocking in front of Dameon. He didn't say anything about Dameon and his lack of vision or how he's running differently. These are all my words, not D'Amico. Like, he didn't say anything about Dameon and how he's been running. It was all about guys not opening up holes for Dameon, which to me doesn't match what I'm seeing. I'm seeing poor blocking for sure, but I'm also seeing plays that are blocked where a good running back would be able to find a way to get 3 or 4 yards on a couple of ththese. Dameon's long carry this year is 3 yards, and I think it's happened once. He's got 8 carries for 9 yards in the preseason. So all the smoke right now points to Dameon Pierce making this team, if we're to believe D'Amico Ryans at face value, if we're to believe how he's being used at practice as some sort of indicator for what his standing is with this team right now. He runs with the ones when Joe Mixon isn't in there. He was sat for the Hall of Fame game like all the starters were. So for them to just up and cut Dameon Pierce or even make him play in the game on Saturday would run contrary to how he's being used. Again, he should play on Saturday, in my opinion. So I think that'll be a big tell. There's one of 3 ways it's going to go for Dameon Pierce come Saturday. He's either going to get sat in this game because they've got him making the team already. He's going to play in this game and do what he's been doing and but still make the team. You know, that they trotted him out there. Maybe he has a good game on Saturday and he makes the team based on that. Who knows? The third option is that he gets let go, and I don't think he's going to get cut. I think somebody will trade for Dameon Pierce. It might just be like Dameon and a 7th for a 6th-round pick, but kind of similar to how the Texans picked up Ben Skoranek and how Nick Caserio has picked up other players in the past. When you get wind that a team is cutting a guy and you know that he's got value on the market and that some team ahead of you in the waiver order is going to pick him up, I got to imagine that there's teams, good teams, that look at Dameon Pierce and say he'd just be a much better fit for what we do. Be the classic Baltimore thing to do would be to trade the Texans a 6th for Dameon Pierce and a 7th, and then Pierce recaptures whatever it was he had in 2022. And that's a team that runs the football in a way that's probably more conducive to Dameon Pierce's running style. So that's a big story to me, the conundrum of Dameon Pierce and what happens with him on Saturday. Does he play or not? I think he will, but I certainly leave open the possibility that they won't play him on Saturday. And number 2, ultimately what happens with him. I think the one, if I had to stack rank the likelihood of things happening, him already making the team and not playing Saturday, him playing and making the team, him playing and then getting traded, or him playing and getting cut. I think him playing and getting cut is the lowest probability of those things. Just because I think Nick will find a home for him where the Texans at least get some sort of draft compensation for him. It might just be them essentially moving up from a 7th-round pick to a late 6th, but I don't think they'll let him go for nothing. That's my prediction with Dameon Pierce. So the Pierce conundrum is a big one. As far as practice goes today, again, I wasn't there for the first hour of practice. I was there. They do four sets of team drills. I wasn't there for the first team drill. It doesn't sound like I missed much. I was there for team 2, team 3, and then in team 4, they did situational football. You're trailing by 6, starting at your own 35, 1st and 10 with a minute to go. None of the units could get anything going in the situational drill. Like there were no version of any of those 1st, 2nd string, whatever, marched down the field and went and got a winning touchdown. So there's that. From what I saw, the things I saw with my own eyes is John Mechie looks to be building on that performance that he had in the preseason game on Saturday. John Mechie had a really nice catch of a deep ball from Davis Mills in this practice where he beat C.J. Henderson for a touchdown. So that was good to see. Mechie seems to be coming out of whatever funk it was he was in for a couple of weeks. I think John Mechie makes this team. Now, again, if he were not to make this team, I feel similar about Mechie as I do about Pierce, that if they're not of mind to keep him, which I don't think is the case because he was actually out there with the ones for a few snaps today. So that's where he's hovering on the roster right now. John Mechie is closer to being a 4th receiver with Diggs, Dell, and Collins than he is getting cut. But if they were of mind to move on from Mechie, I think it would be similar. They would be shopping him and do some sort of trade with Mechie. But I think he makes the team, and he had a good practice. Xavier Hutchinson had one of the best catches in all of training camp today right after that, also from Davis Mills. It was almost like Mechie and Hutch were playing dueling pianos with each other. Mechie with the big catch for the touchdown, and then Hutchinson with a big catch. I think it was for a touchdown, but it was more about the catch. It was a one-handed sliding deep ball catch that was phenomenal. I'm really hoping Xavier Hutchinson is on this team. I'm much more excited about Mechie and Hutchinson than I am about guys like Noah Brown and Robert Woods. So I think ultimately they're going to land on 6 receivers for this team, and I think the big 3 will be there. I think Mechie is getting closer to securing his spot again. Hutchinson has done nothing but good things in camp, but maybe they think they can sneak him through waivers and bring him back on the practice squad. But I would like to see him just because I like new. I like the young. I like the new. The leadership that the older guys provide, I think you're good now with Stephon Diggs in that room and the year of experience. Hell, Nico's a 4th-year guy now. So, but those two made phenomenal catches. Kamari Lassiter had an interception that was kind of a gift, I guess. I wasn't there for that. That was, I believe, in the first team session. Kamari Lassiter had an overthrow interception. CJ overthrew a receiver, and Kamari Lassiter was able to intercept the ball. Joe Mixon played in 11-on-11 today, the whole practice, not just for one series of it. Joe Mixon was out there quite a bit. Joe Mixon is a different cat than the other running backs in this room, plain and simple. stack them all next to each other. You don't even need to watch football. You stack them all next to each other and ask which one is the guy who is has rushed for 1,200 yards multiple times. You point at number 28. He looked good out there. I'll be anxious to see, and we won't probably see it till week 1. But what is the Mixon effect on this running game? The blocking has not been good in the preseason during these games. We'll get a taste of it maybe tomorrow against the Rams, so maybe that'll be kind of a taste that we'll get of Joe Mixon, although I don't think either team is going to be full-on tackling. I think they'll be in shoulder pads for sure with the Rams, but they'll just be doing thud, which is just, shoving guys instead of fully tackling them. But Joe Mixon being out there bodes well for him being in the lineup in week 1. Fantasy owners, make a note of that. I have a fantasy draft tonight, and I have an auction on Friday. I've got another auction in 2 weeks. So make a note of that. Mixon looks good out there. All right. I am gonna shut this one down now. Those are the observations I had. There were some other good plays. The offense looks good out there. I would recommend Cody Stutes is a really good follow for the details of things that I was not able to see because I was only there for half the practice. HOUfootball.com is where you can find Cody, and you subscribe to his Substack. He provides really good synopses of the practices out there. John Harris and his Harris Hits, also an excellent written synopsis of what goes on. That's at HoustonTexans.com. They're excellent resources for that kind of stuff. So giving you what I saw out there, giving my opinions on a few things that are happening with the team, and that'll all continue to evolve. If you're going to be out at practice tomorrow, be sure to stop by the cookout that Cal is having for the 3rd straight year. Cal McNair is doing a cookout for the fans. Free burgers, everybody. Free burgers, and I am one of Cal's chefs. I may even wear a chef's hat. You never know. So, but I'll be out there flipping burgers with Cal and a few others in the media. I think we'll be there as well. Always a fun time. So if you're going to be at practice on Thursday this week, please come by and say hello, snap a picture. Let's have a good time, man. This is going to be a really, really fun season. Training camp almost over. I can't believe it. It's been flying by for sure. A reminder as well, if you would like to send me an email. Man, we had a lively mailbag yesterday. That was a whole lot of fun. HOUmailbag@gmail.com if you want to shoot me an email. And if it's a good one, it'll get read on the podcast. HOUmailbag@gmail.com. Give us a subscribe, give us a rating, give us a review. That always helps as well. Appreciate that. Seth pointed out to me today that the traffic on YouTube has been picking up for the podcast that we've been getting in. It's going from the 1,000 and change into the several thousand realm. So I appreciate everybody who's spreading the word about the podcast, that you can stream it on the Sports Radio 610 YouTube page, and that you can download it and listen to it wherever it is you get your podcast. So with that said, I'm out of time. Anthony Irwin, my producer, thank you for being such a sport during training camp and getting this podcast out on time to everybody. I'll be back tomorrow with a follow-up on the joint practice with the Los Angeles Rams. So until then, have a great day, everybody. Enjoy. Go Texans.